Look into the Indian legends of red-haired giants of the Americas. There are ancient stories of some tribes that there were ancient red-haired giants living in the Americas long before they came. And people have made Photoshop things like this where they show this giant here. There's stories about the Smithsonian finding a lot of giants before. But now that we know that Caucasians, through the DNA that's been found during this alpine glaciation that was here, that Beringia grew to be almost twice this wide, and that there was a gap running up through the middle, which it kind of shows here without the red line, and that these ancient Siberians had come across, but the first that had come across are earlier than the earliest Siberian we find, or ancient Siberian Mongoloid, Asiatic, are Caucasians, whose DNA shows up to be a European type classification. Now, and it's still haplogroups extant today. And it looks like they came in. A lot of people tell you they skirted the Aleutian Islands chain that ran over through here from the Sea of Okhotsk and across also. These people had boats during that time. Nobody wants to give anybody boats, but you can find them in ancient cave drawings that they actually date back to a date. But there's a boat. Oh, that was drawn later. Yeah. But they made it all the way down to South America. But you can see how they come in and they split up into different groupings, and making it all the way over into the northeastern shelf here, but having to go around what was the giant continental ice glaciation that was over here now, but having this part showing it's gone. Well, strangely, somewhere around 10,500 years ago, 10,800 years ago, seems like a cometary impact came in from this way, and it smacked, and this comet was broken up into pieces like a Shoemaker-Levy event. And so they didn't all hit together in a cluster, but a few did, because a bigger one broke into pieces right as it was coming in, it seems, just if you look at the idea. But there are none seen here all through this glaciation that we found so far that penetrated through, but we're looking at 2 miles of ice. But as soon as it reaches past this glaciation point and up in Michigan, and then down through, you're going to find places that are pelted all the way across the northern seaboard, even out of the picture here. And if you give it any thought at all, there's got to be some that hit in the water, and that would have caused massive tidal waves over and above what hit North American continental shelf. And they have found up in Greenland, over here in Greenland, a recent cometary strike. It wasn't recent, they recently found it, and it dates from around the same period, and it shows all the signs that they have of being a larger impact here. I think it's just 12 kilometers across or something. It's a whole lot bigger than the one that we have in Arizona that's been preserved. Most of the others have all been swallowed up by the erosion of time and so on, weather. But so these people coming across here, when we look at some of them, what's strange is a lot of the people that are over here, whenever they find them in the Kurgan burials, and the people that are up in this higher area here in this culture, are breaking over 6 foot easy. A lot of these Asian or Chinese mummies we've talked about that actually show European genetics, and they were on tour for a while here in the Americas, but they stopped that. But they show a genetics that hooks up to Europeans, and they're 6 foot tall. Well, what I found through my studies is a lot of the Amerindians that spoke of these around in this area especially, and another grouping over here especially, talked about these giants, red-haired giants, pale red-haired giants, that someone could get a look something like this. Stories can be exaggerated over time quite a lot, and indeed some of these stories say they were 10 or 12 foot tall. I'd like to say a few things about conjecture and concepts. I've tried a lot. Whenever I hook up to Dungeons and Dragons and all that stuff. But when I was a kid, we were going to try to do an idea of showing up in America before Columbus, and the Indians had all the shaman magic stuff, and we had to help them versus somebody who had invaded, but it was an evil lich lord that had run amok and all this type of stuff. Anyhow, and it was pretty cool. It ran out of a volcano caldera that I actually put, which would be over on the eastern seaboard, but it mimics Yellowstone. And we had a lot of the folklore of the Indians and things that went along with it. I thought it was pretty cool. But in that fact, there was red-haired giants was one of the things these people had fought. And of course, we had already fought frost giants and all kinds of things. So these were known as fire giants. And of course, we're in a volcano caldera, and there's all this fire and magma situations going on. Certain weapons and things, fire berries we'd come up with a tree. Thought this was pretty cool to me. It's a tree that these berries, when they fall off, will explode. But when they explode, that scatters the other seeds, right? And so if one falls off and explodes and the others aren't exactly ripe, they will get knocked off anyhow, and with stems perhaps on them. And that's how you make more of these trees. But it's like a grenade. If you pop one of these off a branch and you don't pop it with the stem, it's going to blow up in 3, 2, 1. But you can also take these and pick them off a tree, and they'll last for a good long time, and use it just like a grenade, where you can pop the stem off and throw it at somebody. And it caused decent damage. It was okay. It was something, it gave us a decent weapon. Anyhow, I digress like hell. In these stories, though, that I looked at of these ancient red-haired giants that everybody wants to have existed, I found that a lot of these shorter tribe of people, like Hopi and Navajo and so on, that really have very diminutive females, a lot of times under 5 foot tall, and males that are nowhere near 6 foot tall, very much closer to 5 foot tall. And you see some elder skeletons of them, and they're very short. A lot of these people that were in that area, a lot of Indians, a lot of Mexican types, Aztecs and stuff, were not that tall. They were a lot shorter of people. And they tell you stories where they could pick up a buffalo and run off with them and do all these type of stories. They could kill a buffalo. They could do this, they could do that. But I find that the story about the one that took the buffalo off was a hairy creature, the color of the hair of the buffalo. And if you look at a buffalo, like this picture here, it shows it to be a more brownish and reddish fawn color, and not so much a red-headed type depiction. Here they're showing this gigantic Indian coming in, and so on, to attack him. And of course he's paler skinned somewhat, reddened skin somewhat. But in the few of these stories, I find that it has to be a cave bear. That has to be a giant grizzly or cave bear type of thing. Cave bears are bigger than polar bears. And they were here in the Americas until shortly after this catastrophe we're talking about. There was only a few remnants, and they went away. Well, how long did they last? Well, did they last long enough to be known that they live in that cave? And they fought those things, and they had red hair, and they're giant. They stand up, when they get up on their hind feet, they stand up 12 foot tall. I saw one kill a buffalo. They're so big, they bit a hold of it and he carried it off. Like you can see a jaguar take a whole antelope up in a tree, right? So some of these stories seem to have come to a dead end for me. And ideas, too, that I found were zodiacal, where they had this whole bear and this man fighting thing, and then you have a chief elder, all of a sudden he points up when he's telling this story, and he shows you Orion and the bear, and she protects her young, and that's the big bear and the little bear, and and they use 3 zodiacs with it. And the strange thing is I figured out years ago that's the same zodiacal run that they use whenever supposedly the priest is walking along in the Bible and has a bald head, and the kids are making fun of him, called him a baldy, and he sicks 2 bears on them and they kill the kids, which is a terrible story, maybe telling you not to make fun of people. Of course, baldy, why would they, those people don't have a balding problem. But who did back then? Wasn't the Greeks and the Romans definitely had that balding problem thing, right? I digress. But so back to these stories here. Let's continue the show here as we keep going. This idea of this creature that they had fought that was a giant. Some of these stories look like they were led to make him into a person. There's a story of a Wendigo, and the Wendigo's a neat story. It hooks up to the idea of Micmac Indian burial grounds and all this type of stuff. But another story set that I found definitely hooked up to mammoths, because these people that were giants actually had tusks like a boar, but they're huge, and they said their head was as big around as you could do your arms. Like they're big, right? And so now we think, well, if your head's that big, then you got to be 30 foot tall. And then somebody had a bone of one of these giants, and it was a mammoth bone, and it's a leg bone out of a mammoth. And if you look at your leg bone and you match that out to it and everything, and the leg bone with mammoth is 3 foot tall, and yours is over to you, like, man, this guy was huge. How tall was he? Right? It's like stories of ancient cyclopses, because an elephant has his eyes on the side of his head up here and not forward at all. And when you look at his skull, it doesn't look like he has eyes. They're over here on the side, which are on ours is like that dent in by your ear and everything over here in your temple area. But in theirs, their eyes are on their temples, if you will, and then in the center, they've got one big hole. What's that one big hole? Well, it hooks up to their trunk. And so they're a cyclops, and they have one big eye. Did the people that were doing cyclopean stonework use elephants' power back in the day? Well, I think that probably is quite feasible. What else are you going to get to pull all that weight and help out? But then again, you have to have pulleys, mechanisms, levers, lots of rope so strong that it can actually handle pulling the weight of the stone that you're talking about too. Multiple ropes, multiple people, multiple elephants, multiple. Oh my God, how did they move that ballback thing? How could you possibly move that ballback stone? It's an amazing concept to just think of. These giants were said later to have terrorized them, and of course they're telling this to American settlers. But this had happened long ago, and these red-headed giants had come in and done these things. Well, are we talking about ancient Phoenicians that had been there 1,000 years before, or much before that even? That, yeah, they were 6 foot tall, and these people are 5 foot tall. It's not too hard to realize that whenever you're almost 6 foot tall, and you have somebody about 7 foot tall right next to you, that's a giant, like Shaq. Even if you're almost 6 foot tall, but imagine if you're about 5'6", 5'8", and Shaq breaks 7 foot. What is he, 7'2" or something? I don't know. Shaq. Dirk Nowitzki. Any of these people. Manute Bol. Hey, he's over 7 foot tall. It's a giant, right? And they're red-headed giants. But some of this seemed to relate to a fawn color, and giants and so on. And mammoths didn't used to have a dark skin like this, but a lot of them, we're finding ones that are preserved now, they had red hair on those too. And so I'm sorry to tell you, I've been able to discount about 7 out of 10 of these stories. And just like UFOs, then you go, okay, we'll see, it's all weather balloons and BS, right? And swamp gas from Venus. And no. The problem with that, just like the problem with UFOs, is that there is still those 3 left over that don't have a correlation. Now you can say that they've been calling it men for so long that you can't find a deviation in their story enough to get anything out of it. You also, by the way they tell the story, it can't be that way. The way they talk about it can't be that way. The Lovelock Cave is one that could have been a cave bear. They tell you Lovelock Cave and how they had burned them in there, but these ancient stories of teepees and totem poles around, and I just showed you the world's earliest totem pole, and it's over in Asia. And it wasn't from these guys going that way. These guys were that way. They came this way. So did these guys, and they came before them. So the first Americans were Caucasians, but you have these stories of these giants. Get taken out of context a lot, though. But in that story of Lovelock Cave, eventually they had gotten them whittled down where they only had a few left. Now that also sounds like that cave bear, where there was giants in the land in those days, and after what? After the deluge, after the big bad thing that happened. So they're thereafter. So it didn't end at all. Well, God did it to kill off the Nephilim. We didn't do a good job. Funny how God didn't pull it off right, huh? Anyhow, let's go on. So they got them in these caves here, and then they knew they were in there. So they hibernate. So they knew they were hibernated in there. So then they put a bunch of wood in front of them, and they burned them out and tried to kill them. That'd be just fine if we didn't have Lovelock Cave story where the guy in there actually found giant skeletons. And then the Smithsonian came, and then later they said, don't know what the hell you're talking about. But the ancient story is that they burned these guys out, and a couple of them ran out, and they killed them instantly with a hailfire of spears and arrows. But then the other ones never came out, so they must have died and they smothered in there. Now, who found this was guano farmers, believe it or not, because guano is incredible fertilizer, and they were going in there digging down through the guano and ran into human bones. So it was like, whoa, time out, what is all this? Well, it seemed to be giants. The guy said he pulled it up to his arm, found the arm and the other arm bones, and he pulled the other arm bone out, and it's like 2 foot long, and he put it up to his arm bone, which is a little over a foot long, and he's like, wow, these guys were huge tall. And you see pictures like this, but this is a fake picture. I don't know if you can tell just that easy, but that guy is so superimposed on this, it almost looks like he's floating on water, floating above the air, and this is a body that was found in a cave, much like Lovelock. And is this CGI'd a fake body? I don't know. You can see footprints all around it like crazy, but just everywhere. So people have been all in there. You can also tell that in this cave there's a ledging system that's back here in the back, and it quits right here for a while and it starts up again. That's odd. And also to me, it looks like there's a cutout that's a square, and cutout that's a square, and cutout that's a square, and so on. So it looks like this has been worked quite a bit in here. Problem I have with this picture is that's so fake as hell it's not even funny. But hey, doesn't he have that pointy hat on? Anyhow, the Miner 49er here is superimposed on the picture, and if this is a body or not, toss that out. Who worked this cave and made it look like an ancient Etruscan burial site? What's going on with that? Huh. Okay, we're going to leave that alone. But there's a lot of these fakes that are out there now. And there's stories of ancient giants. You wouldn't believe it because people don't read in the Bible real good, but there's a story in the Bible of one of the giants that is just huge. I don't know the exact footage anymore off the top of my head or whatever. 90 foot tall, was it, guys? Or was that even the second tallest thing that's in there? And then, there's King Og of Bashan, who had a 13-foot bed and 6 foot wide. And it was supposed to be, he was a giant. Well, was he a giant, or did he have a whole bunch of concubines and he had this sultan giant bed with a bunch of women maybe with him and pillows and stuff? Or was he so wealthy that instead of having a bed that you normally have today, queen size, king size, nay, I have 2 of those by 2 of them long, I have a whole room full of a bed, Is that what it was? Caligula supposedly ended up with that bed, by the way. But, is that true? Is that not? I don't know. People talk about these ancient giants fell down and died, and then they turned into a mud fossil. And you can find mountains that look like giants and heads and things like that. And so people have said, well, there's your mud flood thing. No. That's just, it just looks like that. Look, if you look up here, that cloud looks like a monkey. And this one looks like a Pooh Bear. Give it a minute, it'll go away and it won't look like that anymore. Here's a Cyclops, that one-eyed, helpful giant. So there's stories about some of these giants that are cannibals, but pretty much all of them except for one I found relates to these giant animals that weren't necessarily men. And that led to an idea of a Sasquatch for me. For Bigfoot's supposed to be just gigantically huge. And I've heard people say Bigfoot's built these places that are just gigantic and megalithic like that. And who built these cyclopean type buildings that you see like this? But I think that's just, people reach. It's so bad. And I tell you, I'm not going to do that to you. Sure, I told you there's a chance UFOs are around. I'm not going to discount anything, people. Listen to me now whenever I say this plainly and slowly. If Jesus Christ shows up tomorrow, I will drop the atheism thing as fast as I see the man. Well, no, nay, I'm skeptical. Is this some kind of BS? Is this the Antichrist? What is the? What up with all this? Let's see how this goes. I'm not going to just start jumping towards it at all either. Is that because I'm an atheist? No, we were told about Antichrist and all kinds of bullshit in that same book. So let me just tell you that, I'll be the first guy who'll go, hey, I was wrong. It's amazing. Okay, so, but in that same breath, I don't think so, man. Then we also have the idea of UFOs. And I saw something when I was a kid. I made a video about it and stuff, and I know a few people that I trust desperately that I know have seen some things. And I know one guy that saw something. It was a green orb, and it looked like it did a welding drip and fell down. And I was like, what the hell was that? But then I found out later that was that supernova thing that was in the sky. It was during that same summer, and he saw it. He was walking out to his car, supposedly, and he said he saw this green flash in the sky type of thing, and people knew about this. It had happened or whatever. So years later, I was able to get back with him. I finally saw him again, and I was like, hey, you remember that thing with the UFO whenever y'all... And he goes, yeah, the green deal and everything. And I go, know what that is now. Explained it to him and stuff. But anyhow, these stones at Baalbek, you look at these things, and they've been moved, and, if everybody says, well, they didn't get that out of there. That's a pregnant woman. They didn't get that out of there. Yeah, well, they got 3 of them almost that size that are hooked up in the trilithon. It's famous. It's over there on the wall, and it's not even on the ground. It's up on the next higher level and so on. So what up with that? You see these ancient statues of people and great men well renowned, and they make these giant statues of them. You don't want to make one just regular. Everybody can come and see. Imagine whenever you go to a movie, if they made it all flat and the movie was a screen as big as a TV. Wouldn't that be disgusting? You need a giant TV to look at. You need a giant person to look at. You look at giant effigies, and so whenever they did these gods of old, they always made them bigger than humans, and they even did so in the art whenever the humans were portraying gods. You can see that plainly, so it shows you which one is the great man. Was he a giant? No, I don't think he was a giant. He was a great man. You look at the word in the Septuagint, and the word there is gigantes, and it comes from a root that actually means more than that. This root actually comes from Earthborn. And the strange thing there is, there we go with that Anunnaki space god thing again, because sons of God and the angels came from heaven and they interbred with other people, and now we have a extraterrestrial existence. Well, as I told my brother years ago, no matter how you possibly cut it up, God, as we believe of him, is actually an alien, an extraterrestrial at that. Why? Well, he doesn't come from here. If we believe that he created the earth and all those things, and let there be light and all that, then he's not from here. He made this. Therefore, he's alien to this world. He made us on here out of the earth. Therefore, we are earthborn, but we are here. So, right? Yeah. So God's an alien. Well, so here's these same guys that we looked at a minute ago, and it's the real picture that was taken and edited, because this is an ancient depiction of these same giants that they had fought from the Norse lands, Icelandic people. And if you ever watch one of those Strongest Man in the World, you're going to find that these Germanic Nordic people, every once in a while, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, will pump out somebody that is just a giant of a man. When they show these kings, they show them to be giant. Whenever they used to have ancient statues that they showed, at this point, they are actually giving appeasement to a god, right? And here's Anubis watching over him, and he's dead, and he's become bigger than life, right? He's become a giant, right? We still do this today. You go to the Lincoln Memorial, and Lincoln is not human-sized. He's a giant. In India, they just made the world's largest statue, supposedly of their first ruler of India, an Aryan-ish looking man, but he is huge. It is bigger than the Colossus of Rhodes that used to span the harbor with his feet that people went under, that was one of the great seven wonders of the world. And I remember being a kid, my dad getting me one of these books. Yeah, they used to get me nerdy books because I wanted it. And my dad was interested in things like this too, but a lot in the Old West too. So I got him to get some of the Indian books and things off of it, Indian mythology books and stuff. Yeah. So a couple of mine actually never read and actually never traded out with him until after he passed, and I was able to look back through them again. But that's another story altogether, I guess. Anyhow, so these men of well renown weren't giants. You wouldn't say that Michael Jordan's over 6 foot tall, but you wouldn't say Michael Jordan is a giant, because we got basketball players and everything nowadays. If you just dropped every basketball player in the world, then you'd still say he wasn't a giant. He's a couple inches taller than people. No big deal. By the way, this is a statue. And so there's your story of the guy 36 foot tall that was a Carthaginian here, and that they had found a leg bone that said that he was going to be about that tall. There's one in America, which there's a picture coming up of a guy that's supposed to be about 19 foot tall, right? King Aga Bashan was supposed to have been around 12 foot tall to fit in his 13.5 foot bed. Goliath was said to be 10 foot 6, but if you look into it, the guy was about 6'9". If they used the depiction and the sizes that they used in the ancient writing, and the oldest one, it's about 6'9". But like a fish story, that guy went from 6'9" to 9'6". Isn't that amazing how you just do that? Just switch that around, put the bigger number first. How big was he? Damn, he was big. Well, the kid went to fight a big guy. Yeah, he doesn't even have to be that big, man. This 6 foot tall man and this kid went out there, and the kid took and knocked him out. There are times, like you see in the Achilles movie and so on, where they would send out one versus the other. It either started the fight, or they decided and really went with it, which usually it didn't. They would say that, hey, we're going to have this one fight, and whoever wins, the other one's going to be a slave to them, or whatever, blah, be subject to them. Of course, if the one that lose or pissed off, they would just start fighting. They'd be like, well, now you got to fight anyhow. So it was just a riling up or getting going. Hey, I was watching a wrestling match, and then you got to watch the real thing. This amazing kid with a ranged weapon fought somebody with a non-ranged weapon and knocked him out with a rock. Said he had done it to a bear before, by the way. Put all that back into it again. So there's all these ideas, but again, there's also Maximinus Thrax, which was 8'6" tall, and that is actually documented somewhat. So imagine that. That's pretty incredible. Of course, Waldo Emerson is the world's tallest man that's ever been, and I forget what now his size was. Was he 11'6", something like that? It's just amazing. You look at that. Of course, this is all done from megalomania, and the deal of making your head huge and all that, and Andre the Giant, and a pituitary gland in your brain. A lot of times they'll say there's this benign tumor that's near it that causes it to keep producing, and whenever it does this type of thing. Can you get that through genetics? Well, I'm sure you can, but I don't think anybody pegged it off to where everybody here is having that height. Hey, interesting side note, in the necropolis of Egypt, where they're digging them out, they have found redheads all in one area, blondes all in another, brunettes and blackhairs all in another. But what they did find in that group was a guy that was like 7'4" in Egypt. Yeah, and he was just in a common type burial stuff that was there, but he was that huge. Just kind of another amazing find. Not a big enough find to do a whole video on, unless I want to make a 1 minute and 20-second video, or maybe I'll just ramble like I always do and stretch that out. You see a lot of these pictures where they have faked this, and I don't know if you can tell this or not, but this man's really here around this hole, but everything inside of this hole is fake, and it's a picture of just a regular old burial, right? Well, no, what they've actually superimposed is everything from here, up to his shoulder, around over his head, back, and done that, and then set him on there. And this is just a picture into one of those burials. A little close caving in burial. The guy's laying on his left hand side, probably covered with red ochre, but those aren't real. And there was a college graphics course that these people were told to make fake ones out of not too long ago, and that's caused a huge problem. This guy that's the director of the Mount Blanco Fossil Museum in Crosbyton, Texas, was commissioned to sculpt an anatomically correct to scale human femur. This giant stood some 14 to 6 foot tall. So they said this leg bone was said to be 47 inches long that they had found during the late 1950s during road construction in the southeast Turkey in the Euphrates Valley. Many tombs containing the remains of giants were supposedly uncovered. In 2 sites, the leg bones were measured to be 120 centimeters or 47 inches long, and they had noted this, and so they had this guy, well, this is a paleontologist guy, but they had the sculptor dude here make a fake one and stain it to look like one, and they have that in the exhibit. Now you're seeing how tall that would have been comparative to somebody. But then again, there's also biblical stories that are around there. Deuteronomy says the king of Bashan's bed was 9 cubits by 4 cubits. Genesis tells you account that there were Nephilim in the earth in those days. What does Nephilim mean? Well, that's the fallen. And these were angels, and the angels correlate to stars, and they said 1/3 of the stars had fallen from heaven, and it caused a bad thing to happen. And again, I'm going to tell you that has to do with meteor showers and an incredibly bad thing that happened. And it's meteors falling to the earth. But correlated with that, it tells you there was Nephilim in the earth in those days, and also after. And that whenever the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, and they bore children to them, the same became mighty men, which are of old, men of well renown. There's 2 ways you can look at that. You can say the heaven gods came down and started mating with humans. Here's your Anunnaki story right here, where they had made a secondary part, and this is what they supposedly were wanting to try to get rid of, was these giants. Another way of looking at this is it never says giants in there anyhow, but it tells you they were mighty men, men of old, men of renown. So you hear about things of Sargon the Great and all these other greats that came out of the Akkadians and so on. Well, were they the sons of God? Well, no, but the sons of God started marrying into them and their women and so on, and the offspring of that became these other men that were also of well renowned. But they say old men, men of renown, not giants. And Nephilim means fallen, but people have said that it means giants because of the gigantes connection with what it says in like the Septuagint and so on. So anyhow, guys, red-haired Indian giants, sure, yeah, I find that the Lovelock Cave and about 2 others are extremely compelling. But I find things like this, which is just a sculpture, actually made out of concrete, to not be compelling at all. That old sideshow BS is old sideshow BS. And if somebody made a giant arrowhead one time, or used a piece that they had that looked like a giant arrowhead somewhat, and they carried that around, knocking chunks off of it, flaking it, to get a smaller chunk that was palm size, that they would turn into arrowheads, I wouldn't say there's anything wrong with that. And if you took that and whittled it around for a while, it would look like, well, it could go from this to that, to that, to that real quick. But also in that fact, you would be making small arrowheads out of it. Is this an arrowhead? No, it's not even completely fluted. This is some BS they're showing you again about giants. And if I have real data to show you that's on Earth, I will show you this real data, but a lot of this data is about things that aren't on Earth, and they go with ancient star studies, and they go with zodiacal stories and things. And then when people found the bones of dinosaurs in elder times, they couldn't make wits of it, but they knew what a dead body and the skeleton had looked like. That looks like a leg bone, but that looks like a giant leg bone. And most of our ancient stories about giants are that. Other stories I believe to be totally verifiably true. I believe probably a lot of those are exaggerated. For if I went to meet Shaq, I'd call him a giant. I met Kerry Von Erich, the wrestler, one time. The guy, of course, wore like 2.5-inch platform shoes or something, boots that he wore along with it. But this guy was built like Schwarzenegger. He was huge. And what was he, 6'6", 6'5", something like that? The guy was a mountain, compared to me. Of course, at the time, I was only like 14, 15. I was like 5'8" at the time. And I was like, this guy's a foot taller than me and a 2 foot wider. I mean, this is what it would look like if I ran into Conan the Barbarian. It's about the time that movie came out and so on, anyhow, too. Not shortly after. I think it was the second Conan movie, about that time, right in there, really. But anyhow, guys, Wilt Chamberlain's in that movie with Conan, and in the books, there's places where they call that guy and guys like him the giant, Bambata. He's a giant. Well, so what? Well, yeah, he's huge. If you looked at the size of him compared to even Arnold, Wilt Chamberlain's just a giant, So anyhow, guys, we'll go into this deeper in a few more videos, but like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy. Peace.